He was invited to give talks and lectures globally. Some of the talks were over breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now, Max was assigned a driver who drove with him to all his meetings and engagements. The driver, after parking the car, joined the audience at the back and listened attentively. As the weeks went by, and as the driver listened to the talks again and again, he became so conversant with each line and could recite it word for word. After about 6 weeks, the chauffeur would deliver the talk even in his sleep. In a moment with Max, the driver made a ridiculous suggestion to him by saying, "I have listened to your talk again and again. In the next meeting, let me have a go at it." Max, being Max, agreed to the idea. So at the next meeting, the chauffeur really put up a show and delivered a lecture word for word. He dazzled his audience, and as he brought the lecture to an end, there was a scientist in the crowd, and he raised his hands and he indicated for him to ask the question. The scientist asked a really twisted question, getting to the core of Planck's theory. The chauffeur on the stage said, so what happened was, the chauffeur, in answering the question, said, "I expected more from this audience, especially this question, even my chauffeur could handle." Now, why am I saying this? Our duty and full-time job is to ensure that chauffeurs drive cars and the Plancks share their groundbreaking research and theories. On this note, I want to welcome you all to today's presentation. My name is Desmond Clenham, and I'm the Postgraduate Student Support Coordinator. And I would want to hand over to my boss, Professor Rodney Genga, to quickly introduce the speaker for today, our dean, who will then welcome us and give his welcome address. Can I also suggest that probably we turn off our mics, and number two, our cameras, and then so that we can give the floor to the people. Prof. Genga, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Desmond. I'm grateful to be here. And maybe just to reiterate what Desmond said, I'd ask gently, I think Mr. Ellis, if you don't mind just putting off your camera, please. If that would be okay, please. If you just look at the icon next to the audio function, if you just press the one that looks like a camera, you could just put it off, if you don't mind. I think as is attending to that. Hello, everybody. My name is Rodney Genga. I work at the Academic Development Unit. I will be speaking later in the session. So what I'll do is I'll take the opportunity to introduce my boss, because I think it's going on a hierarchy level. So I'll take this opportunity to introduce Professor Ian Gendrell. He's a professor of lighting and high voltage engineering. He's an electrical engineer. I'm sorry to say, because I'm a mechanical engineer, we are consistently making fun of which engineering is more advanced than the other. So he's been the dean, and he's currently the dean of the Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment. He's an incredibly intelligent fellow. We wouldn't give him the title if not. He has led a lot of pioneering efforts within not just within the faculty, but at the country level, serves on multiple boards in the engineering space that are really pioneering and pushing us forward, including ESCOM. And we can see why we have problems with ESCOM. But outside that, I just want to take the opportunity to really welcome our dean, who's really been a light in terms of where we're going as an economy, as a country, and what critical role not just engineering, but the built environment as a whole plays in terms of transforming not just Gauteng, not just South Africa, but the continent and the planet as a whole. We are critically positioned as an institution and as a faculty in particular for the challenges that lie ahead as a society and as a country. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Professor Ian Gendrell. Please give us a couple of words of wisdom on his experience and knowledge over this space. Prof, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Genga, Rodney. So what I would say to everybody is that I'm very much more comfortable if you work on first name terms. So my name is Ian, And I'd really love to get to know all of you as the years go by. I think, Desmond started with a story, and I'm going to start by welcoming you with a story as well. And it's just to say how thrilled I am that you've chosen to do postgraduate work, and I'll come to that in a moment. But I remember when I was a lot younger than I am now, I'd finished my 4th year of engineering, and I was a bursary student. And my company said, when I said I'd like to do postgrad work, they said, well, you can do postgrad work, but we'll give you 1 year only. So I opted for a coursework-based master's degree because that was the only degree that I could fit into 1 year. And I started my courses and I had to do a research project. And the professor that I was working with then said, and it was in an area which was completely foreign to me. I had started off my undergrad career with a complete focus on what we refer to as control and instrumentation. And I thought that was the greatest thing on the planet. And my professor came along to me around about March, April of my 1st year as a postgrad and said, there's a particular problem that's occurring, and I wonder if you wouldn't like to consider looking at it. And it was in an area of high voltage engineering. And I had done a 4th year course in high voltage, but I didn't love it at all. And I thought, well, maybe I can look at this thing. Anyway, the story I want to relate to you is this. That process of being told, have a look at this, allowed me to start for the very, very first time in my life, really, looking at something that I knew precisely nothing about, and also looking at something where my professor didn't have an answer. And that convinced me that research was one of the most important and most profound things that a human being can do. And I'll tell you why. It, first of all, satisfies your own curiosity, but it also allows you to make this incredibly important thing called a contribution to knowledge. I'm going to come back to that later. Anyway, the bottom line is, what started off as a 1 year course-based master's turned by mistake into a PhD, which I'd never intended to complete. And once I got my PhD, I was so in love with research that I ended up coming back to the university. And I suppose the story is I haven't left since then, and that was 1990. And I absolutely love what we do here. But remember, what we do here has got a number of facets. The first one is teaching, and another one is research. And I see this as being part of the same story. Now, many of you from engineering in the built environment would be pursuing your postgrad career to develop your own knowledge and competence in a particular area. And some of you may already be thinking about, I want to make a contribution to knowledge. What I do want to remind every single one of you is that it's very important that we have good undergraduate qualifications and that we develop professionals for our industry. And when I think about our industry, noting that you were welcomed with good morning, good day, and good evening, our industry isn't just the industry in South Africa or in Johannesburg. It's the industry that we find across this globe. That industry requires those young professionals. But equally, if you want to take an economy to a position of not just survival, but actually one of thriving, you've got to make sure that you begin to educate and train at the postgraduate level. And the reason I say that is that once you start engaging in postgraduate work, whether it's to undertake those specialist courses, which really take you to the cutting edge of knowledge, or whether you choose to become a creator of knowledge, what you then start doing is you start feeding that expertise and that contribution back into your economy. And there's no doubt in my mind that if we look across our continent, we need to be focusing more and more and more on developing these high-level skills, these high-level competencies that go beyond the requirements of the profession, which are important, but they start allowing you in your own minds to develop skills and competencies that I can assure you, many of you don't yet realize that you have. So what's very important is for each one of you to recognize that your contribution by choosing to become a postgraduate student is profoundly important to the economy of this continent. I think the other important thing I want to say is that when we consider being involved in a research environment, that creation of knowledge, let me assure you that if you want to make yourselves, your economy, your countries self-sustainable, and in fact world-leading, you've got to be creating that knowledge. We cannot rely on knowledge being imported and brought to us. This is unacceptable. We need to make an absolute commitment to be the creators of that knowledge, to become the leaders. And we all know that we can do that. And I'm looking to you young people to really be at the forefront of that and to recognize that this business of knowledge creation, this business of developing expert skills in particular areas, these are the things that the future of our economies are built on. These are also things that I want you to be absolutely proud of. Then I suppose the last thing I'd like to really say is, and I'm sure you're going to hear more and more about this, is that one of the things that we've realized in the faculty over the last, let's call it the last decade, is that every single student, whether you're a first-year student who's never been to Johannesburg before, or whether you're a PhD student joining us for the first time, every single student, particularly during these times, the times of COVID and pandemic and everything's unknown and we're grappling with a whole new future, every single one of you will need support. And I want you to recognize that we know that you will need support. And the colleagues that you're going to be meeting, Desmond and his team, Professor Genga, Rodney and his team, the colleagues from the Academic Development Unit are there to support you in parallel to what you get from your supervisors, from what you get from your schools. I want you to know that these young professionals are there to work with you. They are there to assist you. But I'm going to put it to you like this. Unless you reach out to us and say, I'd really like some assistance or help in this, that, or the next area, we don't know that you necessarily need that help. So I'm opening the door to you to say these young people that you're going to be encountering over the next while in this session, these people are there to help you. I want you to get to know them. I want you to be able to say, I need help. One of the most difficult things I remember as a student was to know when I needed to put up my hand and say I needed help. Most times we believe we can solve all these problems and I'm able to get through it, etc., etc. Actually, sometimes you need to put up your hand and say I need a little bit of help. And it's a little bit of help that usually gets you over that bump. I also want to invite every single one of you, and I think my colleagues will confirm this, to understand that I'm in the role of the dean of the faculty, but my real love at this university is students, support for research, support for education. That's what I enjoy. That's why I became an academic. I became an academic because I believe that the youth are absolutely the future of this planet. So I want you all to know that I've got a door here which also stands open to students. Don't imagine that just because I'm called the dean, it's impossible to get a word in with me. I'd really enjoy meeting all of you at some point in time. I wish we were doing this in a face-to-face mode. But I think my colleagues will confirm that my door stands open and I get no bigger thrill than engaging with students, sharing ideas, hearing what's happening, and really trying to understand the contribution that's being made. So with that said, I don't want to take any more of your time. I want to end this by saying welcome to the University of the Witwatersrand. Welcome in particular to the postgraduate program in the Faculty of Engineering in the Built Environment. And I want to challenge every single one of you to use your time as a postgrad student to step back, reflect, look around you at the city, at the countries, at the industries, and ask yourself, what are the differences that we can make? It never ceases to amaze me when I look out of my window that what I see out there is the product of engineering and the built environment. We have an obligation, working with colleagues from all of our faculties, to make the world we look out there a much better place than it is. And frankly, we're going to rely on you, those creative minds, to actually help us do that. So with that said, I want to thank our Academic Development Unit colleagues for giving me this opportunity. I want to thank every single one of you who's taken the time to join this meeting. And I want to wish you all the very best. I truly look forward to watching the progress of each and every one of you. Professor Genga, Dr. Keenan, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. We thank you. And I know that we thank you very much for your wise words. They said a word to the wise is enough. And Prof, we are very grateful to have you taking time off your busy schedule to be here. We are very excited, and we thank you for the support that you continue to give us. And then the postgraduate, we don't take that lightly at all. I know that anytime we call on your office, you are there to help. I know that Prof. Genga just stepped out, but he would come, but then I will continue with the program, and then I will do the presentation. Basically, we have something small that is basically more like a teaser. So I would share my screen. Okay, thank you very much. And then I think that the good professor had actually started basically he spoke about everything that I intend to share with the team today with all the postgraduates, what they need to know. I titled it, The Tenets of a Postgraduate Education. Now, any good talk can be likened to a miniskirt, short enough to arouse interest and long enough to cover vitals. I hope that I will be able to arouse your interest and also cover relevant details as we talk about this particular work. Small piece of, we can call it advice or a word of caution. Now, I want to start by asking a basic question. It's a bit philosophical, and it's also debatable, and it's subjective in nature. What is the deliverable of a university degree? Is it an outcome of is it basically your thesis, your research report, your dissertation? Or perhaps it's that graduating certificate that you're looking forward to? Or is it being acknowledged by the dean? By the way, that was me and the dean during my PhD graduation. It was an exciting moment. So people think that that is a deliverable. Or is it you getting recognition for doing something very well? Just like you can see Tuli Madonsela in that thing with the former chancellor and the former vice chancellor of Wits University. And when we look at all these things, in my opinion, the deliverable of a university degree has to do with you. It is you. And why do I say that this is you? We will go into it. Now, before I continue, I want to digress a bit. Now, you heard the dean talk about the central theme of a postgraduate education is the element of research. Whether you are an honors student, a postgraduate diploma, master's by coursework or research, or a PhD candidate. Now, research is making relevant knowledge, as the good professor just told us. Now, when you look at it, in my opinion, you start with identifying a practical problem. Now, that practical problem should motivate a research question. Now, that research question should define a research project, which should lead to some form of results or solutions that help to solve the problem you started with. So research is basically a closed loop, and it is an iterative process, and this is the journey that is expected. On this journey, it is expected that we are saturated with some tenets. Now let's dig in. Now I put here as when you are doing a bachelor's degree or an undergraduate degree, that degree is foundational and rudimentary to everything that you're going to do as you continue with your research career. Now, at the master's level, we are talking about mastery. That is where you have to master the field you are in. And once you've done that, you've done all the groundwork. Then at the PhD level, the good professor talked about contribution to knowledge. Now, let's dig in. I put this in here that when we look at the tenet of undergraduate degree, first of all, you need to understand simple things deeply. Why am I saying that we need to understand simple things deeply? It is very important because the deeper your understanding of basic concept, the more profound the application of that concept becomes. Now, to master the complex, you need to first master the simple. You see, I think that in your research journey, or a lot of us that are in this research journey, you will be faced with two choices. It will either you be distracted with shallow understanding of the fact, or you have to focus and look at the deep understanding of the meaningful. You see, one path is simple and easy, but the other is less traveled. Now, Bruce Lee once said, I fear not that man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear that man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. This is why it is very, very important to understand simple things deeply. On the second point, we're talking about it is the stage where, as undergraduate, you need to hone the problem-solving, critical and analytical skills. Now, at that point, you need to know how to gather relevant data. You focus on the facts and the evidence. Examine a bit and chunks of the data. And also there, you need to find the trends, patterns, and understand the connections between them. The third thing is that you have to become very resourceful and start thinking entrepreneurial. If the unemployment statistics are anything to go by, we have to start thinking of deploying our skills into various sectors of the economy where we can be able to become a champions of providing solutions to the problems that we faced. We know in Africa we have problems ranging from education, healthcare, terrorism, to transportation, to energy crisis, to water shortages. Now, to curb the unemployment and the poverty ravaging the youth, our undergraduate, once you are about to finish, you should be thinking of starting your own thing. There are a lot of success stories that looked at people who started from their garages and had some basic understanding from their undergraduate courses, and then that led them to do something very creative in life. The next thing is that once you become resourceful and you understand the theoretical principles, you don't apply this to practical problems. So I think that we are in an era where we should be looking at problem-based curriculum that help us to be able to address the challenges that we face. The thing here is it's about communication. How do you give your research or how do you give your ideas a voice? And I'll come to communication later in this talk. Now let's dig into the postgraduate. Here it applies to masters and the honors and postgraduate diploma people. First of all, you need to master the field of your research. When you are doing a master's, the prof talked about you started as a coursework and that thing turns into a PhD. You need to understand the nature and purpose of your research. It is very important. The word is research. So it means you search and you go back and you research. Now, it also implies that you need to master the relevant method, procedure, and techniques of carrying out that piece of scholarly work. Example is that, first of all, a lot of us, we know how to use Microsoft Office superficially. We need to understand how to use Microsoft PowerPoint, Excel into depth. We have to also, if you are from the built environment where you are doing data-driven work, which you need to understand your Stata, your SPSS, you need to know your MATLAB, your basic programming languages that will help you. These are tools that you need to understand them and how to apply them and even how to modify them to meet your specific need as a researcher. The next thing is that you have to master the relevant body of knowledge in that field. This is where you have to do a literature review in depth. You need to know the theoretical framework. You need to know the theories underlining whatever you are doing. And once you know this particular way, you'll be able to start looking for gaps in knowledge, gaps in research, and try to see what can I do to be able to fill that gap. And I want to say that you should avoid recruiting people to carry out your experiment for you. I know somebody is right there. It's saying, Desmond, why are you saying this? A lot of people do that. And you will realize that after your master's education, you cannot even do basic descriptive statistics because you employed somebody to do the whole work for you. Now, when I also talked about you need to comprehend the consequences of your research. Now, let me say that when I talk about the body of knowledge, I'm looking at you need to know what are the seminal authors and books and papers that you need to read in your field. It is not everything that is published out there is something you should consume. You should be able to declutter that knowledge. You should be able to separate the real stuff from the chaff. And your ability to do this is what will make you very important. I always tell postgraduate students that you are only distinguished when you decide to distinguish yourself. You need to understand the question. So what? That is the consequences of your research. I think that gone are the days where you do your research and you leave it on the shelf. This time around, we are looking at doing research so that that research can inform policy. That research can have ethical implications on how we conduct ourselves. You also need to be resourceful. And I put here that you have to have a well-formed mind. My little study has shown that we have two classes of students. We have those with well-filled minds and those with well-formed minds. In the era of the internet, when you go to Mr. Google, it gives you anything. But how do you respond? How does your brain respond to ideas and territories that you are never familiar with? That is what we talk about resourcefulness. And communication is running through them. I would come back to communication because it is very, very important. Now, at the PhD level 1, we are talking about originality and novelty. We are talking about having independent critical judgment. Now, judgment is a set of opinions arrived at that are backed by relevant data after an individual engaged in reflective and independent thinking. It requires logical connections between ideas in coherent and simplistic fashion. You become more discerning. You weigh in on the facts of the argument. You question the assumptions and values underpinning the area of research. You see, you become an independent researcher, an independent thinker with a confidence to stand up for your own ideas with a constructivist and rationalistic framework. And then the third one is that you have to close a gap in knowledge or find a research niche to explore further for the rest of your life. A PhD is not a comic fantasy. You also need to develop communication skills where you give your ideas a voice. Now, I say is that communication is a skill and we need to develop it. It is not anybody's forte, but it is everybody's. Now, this is an x-axis, and that is a y-axis. Let's say I want to plot on the x-axis talent, capacity, competence, and skills. And then on the y-axis, communication. Now, let me divide this rectangular axis into 4 quadrants. And now, based on trigonometry, we say this is the first quadrant, the second quadrant, the third quadrant, the fourth quadrant.
Sorry, Desmond.
Yes.
I believe you're sharing a presentation.
Yes.
Do you mind sharing your screen unless I'm the one who's not able to see?
I'm sharing my screen actually. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, I can see.
Yes.
Good.
So it is on you.
Yes,
Okay.
you can.
Okay.
Yes, I can too.
Okay, good. Sorry about that, but I will share this with the team anyway. Now,
No problem.
Let's go to the first quadrant. Now, the first quadrant, the third quadrant. These are people with no or low level of skill and are poor communicators. These people, the universe automatically takes care of them. They will generally not get anywhere because they are not good at anything. They are the bottom feeders. Let's go to quadrant number 4. These people are high competencies but poor communicators. They are excellent at their chosen field and world-class experts with proven track record of results in their wake. They are very low on their ability to communicate effectively. Somebody is thinking about that professor in that strength of material class or the theory of machines, who you can see that knows what he's talking about but cannot tell us in a simple term for us to understand. And so everybody ends up being confused. Now, this group should be encouraged to learn how to communicate. In quadrant number 2, it is in red. That is a no-go zone. These are effective communicators but poor technical competencies. These people have practiced on their communication skills. If you remember the story I told you about the chauffeur and Max Planck, this is the reason why I told you that story from the beginning. They speak and appear brilliant, but there is nothing there. And it's easy for the people in the quadrant 4 to see this guy and say, this guy is very shallow. then they under-deliver. These are very dangerous people, and we need to watch out for them because they look and appear good, but they deliver a mess. Actors, imposters, and connivers, they are great talkers, but little doers. And so across the globe, you have a lot of people who say they are experts. They go to televisions and they speak, but you know that deep down there, they are very shallow. In quadrant number 1, which is green, people are the experts and at the same time are able to communicate their ideas properly. We have very few people that you can do that. You can attest to the fact that the director of the ADU, when he spoke, how fluent he was with his words. And so applies to our dean. There are very few of these people. So you have the ideas, but nobody understands it because you are not able to speak out well. Now, I want to tell you a story. I like telling stories. This story comes from the ancient Greek mythology, which captured the dangers of not working on your ability to communicate effectively. It comes from the time of Troy. There was a princess called Princess Cassandra, the second most beautiful princess in all of ancient Greece. She had attracted the interest of the Greek god Apollos. Apollos wished to marry Cassandra. Cassandra said, if she was to marry him, she wanted a gift, and the gift was prophecy. And Apollos was to grant Cassandra the gift of prophecy, seeing the future, the gift of seeing everything that has to come, knowing what is going to happen. When the day of the wedding came, Apollos was there, but Cassandra did not show up. Apollos, in a great grave rage, placed a curse on Cassandra. Knowing that he could not take away the gift of prophecy, the curse he placed on Cassandra was that nobody would believe her, whatever she says. Cassandra saw the fall of Troy, but nobody ever believed anything she said. This is the worst curse a person can have. If you do not work hard on your communication skills, it will drive you insane. How do you get the ideas from your head into a world in a way for others to engage and begin to support you and give you the resources you need to thrive? It will drive you mad. Communication is a skill. You have to learn it. Now, I want to get to a point where it was René Descartes who says, I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum. You are looking at people that are superficial. You are either, you fall under one of this category. You are either shallow or deep. There are no middle grounds here. In my opinion, you fall under one of this. And this is affected by the way you reason and think. You probably, if you are the person that says, I am always right, you are basically a cult leader, treating your thoughts as if they are the gospel. Or you could be a politician. We have so many of them around. They are wrong. We are right. That is a politician. Or you could be a contrarian, finding flaws in other people's thinking, but blinded by your own limitation. The first three is not ideal for any society. So I would entreat you that in your journey as a postgraduate, or you are about to submit, you should be able to weigh yourself and see where you belong. We need to aspire to become critical thinkers, engaging with the diverse sources of information and questioning their credibility. That is to say, trust, but always verify. Because the work you will do as a scientist, as an engineer, as an economist has impact. And if you don't verify whatever you are saying, you could put people's life in jeopardy. Or be a scientist, seeking out experts who disagree with you and weighing the strength of their logic. But on a lighter note, I choose to be an engineer. I want to test the validity of the laws of aerodynamics by building an aeroplane to fly. Because I want to enjoy the dimensions of thinking, I have to say that you need to see the wisdom of the big picture thinking, unleashing the potential of focused thinking, discovering the joy of creative thinking, recognizing the importance of realistic thinking, realizing the power of strategic thinking, feeling the energy of possibility thinking, embracing the lessons of reflective thinking, questioning the acceptance of popular thinking, encouraging the participation of shared thinking, and then experiencing the satisfaction of unselfish thinking, and overall enjoy the return of bottom line thinking. Finally, I want to remind you of the words of Dr. Thomas Sowell, the pragmatist. He said, the problem isn't that Johnny can't read. The problem isn't even that Johnny can't think. The problem is that Johnny doesn't know what thinking is. He confuses it with feeling. On this note, I want to wish you all the best, and I'll be seeing you around. And also thank you for the opportunity. I think having said this, I would want to hand over to Professor Rodney Genga to share his few words, and then we'll welcome some comments and reflections. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Clenham. I think everyone who's here, we can just pass our thanks to him as well as the Dean who spoke before me. Tell me, Desmond, are you able to hear me? Am I audible and clear?
Loud and clear, sir.
Thank you. I'm having a few network challenges here. That's why I wasn't able to see your screen. So thank you so much for clarifying that, and I'm grateful to be here. So thank you very much, Desmond. Mine is also going to be very brief. My colleagues who've spoken before me have laid the foundation quite clearly in terms of what is the expectation, I think, of a postgraduate. This is a welcome address. Desmond and his team will be putting together a series of webinars this year that will really touch on a couple of things that we believe will be instrumental to your journey at WITS. I think all of us who have been where you are very appreciative of the journey that you will take on your career to be either at a master's, PhD, honors level, depending on where you are. And I think one of the things that I just want to say very briefly now, in recognition of this, you are at this particular juncture, either at stage 1, which is at the proposal phase, either at a master's, honors, or PhD level, where you're just coming in and getting a better feel of what the institution offers. And it being offered in an online environment can prove challenging. And that's why we have a resource like Desmond and the team he will be overseeing this year, just to get you more comfortable, just to get you more accessible and acclimatized to the WITS environment, even if it be in an online environment. Should we find ourselves where there's a third wave that might lead us to maybe have to close the institution or limit face-to-face contact, Desmond becomes a critical resource for how do you access a lot of the infrastructure at WITS remotely. When I say infrastructure, I mean learning infrastructure. Access things like publications and journals remotely. How would you easily be able to do that? Access library resources. As somebody who studied at WITS, the library was so critical in terms of certain books that I could not easily access online because I either had to pay for them or the version was just not visible or accessible anymore. But the libraries got a wealth, especially the Engineering and Built Environment Library has a wealth of information that will surprise you if you just take an opportunity to look up and find out what resources are there. So Desmond will be able to champion a lot of that to give you that level of access, to be able to even access it either physically or virtually. And this will be part of the webinar series. How do you access learning over the course of this year? But back to what I was about to speak about, was just to welcome you, just to touch very briefly. As I said, some of you are at the entry phase of your academic journey. And we're excited to have you in our institution. Some of you are at the interim, which is the building block, where is the research phase, where you're actually engaging in either your learning, if you're doing it by coursework, by research, or the experimental data collection phase of your particular journey, because you've already conceived the idea with your supervisors and now you're just working on building it together. And others are in the not so clear stage, but the end, the closing of your journey. So this particular webinar series will really touch on these three aspects. See how best for you to navigate. For those that are at the entry level, what does the next stage look? For those that are at the data collection, research, coursework level, what does that mean? And those that are at the exit level, what does that mean? And what does that mean for the next chapter of your career? So Desmond and the team will we really want this to be meaningful, practical, applicable, because that is the backbone of our engineering and built environment in terms of architecture, survey, quantity survey, planning degrees. That's really what it's about. How do you make it practical and applicable? Without further ado, I'll spend about a few minutes, maybe 3-4 minutes, just showcasing a few numbers that are interesting to our institution. For those that are aware of it, I'm glad that you're. For those that are learning of this, we'd like to share this with you just to see where we are as an institution and what does it mean for your academic track. So Desmond, I'll kindly ask you to let me know if you're able to see my screen. I'm a little bit concerned about my the internet
quality. Yes, I can see your screen.
Thank you. And if anything drops off, please feel free to let me know.
No problem. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir. So very quickly, welcome to WITS. Meaning, I know others have been here, but I just want to show just a few things and what it means for your journey as somebody moving into the next level of your qualification. So the question has always been, why WITS? Why did you choose here? You could have been an undergraduate that went here, so you're here by causal effect. You did your undergraduate, you've done your postgraduate. Some of you have journeyed from outside WITS, from different institutions to join us. Others have journeyed from different countries to join us. All over, well, the answer is we are all here today. And that's what's grateful about having you here. As of 2020, remember these rankings are done by different institutions and they vary. I have to be very clear and cognizant about it. But what I want to bring to our understanding is what these values actually mean. So according to the academic ranking of world universities, heavily looks at research as a really backbone of the matrix that they look at. As of 2020, WITS was ranked between 200 and 300 band. And this is a big number because if you look at it, there's over 25,000 universities in the world. To put it in context, there's about 3,000 plus institutions of higher learning in the United States of America. And we are pretty much seated between the 200 and 300 band, which is the upper 10 percentile. That already tells you globally where you are in terms of access to resources, access to learning, but what it means to qualify with the degree that leaves from WITS. It comes a responsibility. Another statistic that I'd maybe just want to put before you, according to Times Higher Education Index, this really looks at looks at different global companies and looks at the upper level management, the people that pioneer and drive the change that serve at executive level within globally recognized institutions. WITS is ranked 54th in the world. The understanding of this matrix is that as much as you're working here, even if you're looking to be involved, because a lot of us here want to go into academia, others want to go into the private sector, others want to go into national sector, but your contribution when you graduate from our institution should lead or drive change at a managerial level, meaning at an executive level, when you leave our institution, you have the opportunity to serve at an impact level. So whenever you leave here, think about it from a point of what changes can you make? And I'll come back to this point at the end of my presentation, why this is so critical as a responsibility we have. The last one I want to share with you is currently we're ranked #1 in South Africa by this particular matrix already. That gives us a bit of understanding where we are. What does this actually mean for us in terms of the engineering and built environment? And what future lies ahead for us? And I hope through this series over the next couple of series that Desmond will raise, but also when you look inward, what does some of these qualifications mean and what are the challenges and opportunities for a graduate leaving our institution? I'll go through some of this very, very briefly. I want to believe over the next couple of weeks or the next couple of webinar series, you can engage with Desmond and the speakers to see where your contribution lies in making a difference. As we look at this, we've looked at the previous slide that helped us understand that according to the alma mater index, 54th in the world. Remember, it's over 25,000 institutions, and here you're groomed for leadership. And I'd like you to take the opportunity to think about that, because our location within Gauteng in Johannesburg, which is a buzzing, thriving, and economic powerhouse city, what does it mean to graduate here? What does it mean to have the kind of supervisors and lecturers that you have within a city like this? What kind of intellectual capital roams the environment of it? And what does that mean for change? So Johannesburg has been a pioneer in innovation, in transformation in terms of the economic sector, and having the kind of minds and the kind of resources around you within WITS helps tap into that potential that I hope we'll be able to translate to the degrees we're about to take on with our studies. So what are the opportunities? And as I said, these opportunities, I want us to have a number in context. Africa is projected by 2050 to double in population numbers, meaning we'll be about 2 billion people. Now, the number this matrix was taken in about 2013 when they looked at the number, which was just over 1 billion people on the continent, and will be about 2 billion by 2050. Meaning, if you think around you now, the resources that are available, if we don't start to think differently, and this has to be backed at academic institutions, the future, the next wave of the entrepreneurs, the next wave of people who will think about creating opportunities, jobs, stable and urbanized structures and sectors, and how we even develop and rethink our rural sectors have to grow from academic institutions. And you're critically placed at an institution like WITS, whether through academia, you can impact and make the difference. I know Professor Ian Chandral didn't go into detail of the kind of boards and where he serves in terms of trying to make a remarkable difference in this country is huge. Your qualification is not just enough to be put on a shelf, or not just enough to impact the next generation, but to think about how that next generation can contribute meaningfully to the challenges, but more importantly, the opportunities that our continent offers. I will then run through this. So when you're looking at infrastructure, the new cities and housing, when you look around now with a lot of our urban centers, you can realize, particularly on the Africa space, if I use the continent as a place we can think about, we're not really built for the numbers that we have. And if you expect them to double, it means new cities. This opens up a whole new emerging area. How do those cities look? How would they be represented? Housing, and how does it stay eco-friendly? Infrastructure, meaning sustainable, buildable, and effective roads that are smart and considerate to the environment that we live. We'll need the architects, we'll need the planners, we'll need the civil engineers, and critically as well, we'll need the digital arts people who are involved in reimagining and mapping and simulating what those cities will look like. These qualifications have a critical role to play. The numbers will double. We need resources, we need access to be able to cater for those people. How do you start to think, how does my research fit critically in these pillars where I can play a big role in terms of the new cities and how they will appear and how they look? There has to be access to funding for this because it's no longer sustainable. But we have to think green and we have to think sustainability. How do these degrees play in those spaces, particularly at a postgraduate level? And even if you get a chance to supervise, how do you take advantage of these new challenges? Next thing is around rehabilitation and development of the new urban areas. How do we start to reimagine? Because where we are at the moment, before we move out, wherever we are now, which are heavily congested, we use Johannesburg and other major cities in different parts of this continent. How do you start to rethink about how do you reimagine those, and how do you build new urban centers to factor in the challenges that we're faced with the new ones? The construction, economics, and management people. This is property studies. This is construction studies. How do you start to reimagine what this? The property industry has grown tremendously over the last couple of years. How do we take advantage of that and reimagine that? Energy is big for a doubling economy. And this energy can be seen from the electrical engineers, mechanicals, all the way to the chemical engineers. How do we start to rethink smarter, quicker, efficient, and more sustainable energy with the carbon footprint that we have around the world? And how do we factor the African continent and South Africa in that space? Energy is huge. And how do you tailor make your research to start to deal and accommodate some of these changes? Manufacturing cannot be underplayed. For you to move from a developing world to a more developed, sustainable world, you need to produce high value add products. How do you start to reimagine what those kind of manufacturing sectors are? We've got a lot of informal manufacturing happening all over the place because Africans consistently make a plan. But how do you transform that into areas where you can be mechanized and you can put really good industrialization behind it? This is the industrial engineers, the mechanical engineers play critical roles in these spaces. Air transport and communication. Before we believed air transport was building aircrafts, which was a challenge, especially coming from Africa. But now if you think about the power and the influence of drones and satellite technology, how that is playing a bigger role now and how we can manufacture them locally. You don't have to build a Boeing or an Airbus. You can be involved in the technology that's building drones, that is delivering medication, the technology and the materials that are being used to be able to develop transportation networks through these drone structures that can make a difference, and communication that are required for the next industrial age. So you've got the aeros, the electrical, the mechanicals, and the metallurgists are heavily in this space. The minerals and new materials, again, how do we substantiate, how do we beneficiate, and how do we make mining more intelligent and more effective? You've got your miners, your your metallurgists, your industrial engineers, your chemical engineers that play in this space. And lastly, technology and medicine. This is where our biomedical researchers become very critical, as well as the metallurgists who are materials engineers that play a critical role in that space. I know I've spoken a lot. I didn't want to talk too much, but I just wanted to open our minds to the opportunities. There may be challenges now, but I hope you see the opportunities. And this is where we are going in terms of continent, in terms of a country, and how do you tailor make or line up some of what you're doing to make an impact in these spaces that can help us with the emerging economies that are coming ahead. I hope in your research, even if it doesn't link directly to this, when you qualify and move beyond, you can think around some of these opportunities and capitalize on them to be able to not just make an impact. Obviously, you can make a profit if you get involved in this, but more importantly, sustainable change in terms of the continent and the numbers that are coming. I'm encouraged by what we see in terms of the younger generation really thinking differently about solving the problems that we face today. There is no way we can avoid the impact of national legislation that we can't avoid, because governments have to play a critical role here, but at whatever stage, at whatever role you can play, I hope that we can take up the opportunity to be able to rise to the challenge. We have been placed amongst the leaders on the continent in terms of an academic institution. Let us show the value of our qualification by making positive change. I close my presentation with that, and I thank you so much for listening. Desmond, over.
Thank you so much, sir. I think now we have, if you have any questions, this is the time to ask them, or any clarity, this is the time to ask them. So please, any question you want to ask or anything you want to say. I think they've said a mouthful. It's time to ask. What is happening is that this webinars will be happening on a weekly basis, and we are just finalizing the program, and then we'll send it to you so that you can put them in your diaries. And then I'm also glad to see, I've seen a lot of people, even people from all over the world here, and some of the guys who will be speaking to us were also here, people from industry, people that have had so many patents, people that have won the National Field Medal, people that have been elected into the National Academy of Sciences and Engineers. You'll be hearing from all these people. The idea is that we want to bring them to you, and then you can then use them as resources and then as a springboard to launch out into the deep. So if you have any question, can you? And I just also want to say that we have this video is recorded. After that, we'll put it on Canvas. You can also download it from there and then listen to it. We have about I think 7 or 8 minutes.
Sorry, Desmond, as we are speaking, I see a question there where I think it's Kairos, who's asked, can anyone advise on how you can access the recording? I stand to be corrected. I see John here, but I believe as long as you've attended this at the end of this session, you will have access to the recording automatically. I stand to be corrected, but I believe
that's correct.
That's correct. Thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. And also, I would upload this onto Canvas. So if you are a student of VIT and you are within the postgraduate, the ADU postgraduate support, you should have them. I've also noticed that some of you have not accepted the link for you to register yet. So please do so, and you have them. Those that are not here, once the recording is done, I have all your emails. I would forward them to you. Yep. I guess the good prof and my boss, I guess my boss and my boss's boss, they've delivered the issue, the issue in a very nice and more practical way. So right now, I think it's General Donald Rumsfeld that said there are no knowns. These are things we know that we know. And there are known unknowns. These are things we know that we don't know. and there are unknown unknowns. These are things we don't know, we don't know. Now you know, because they've expressed, most of the people that spoke today, they've been able to help us understand the journey ahead of us. They've traveled that path and they said it is doable. You can also do it. Please come talk to us and just send me the email. And I also want to say that we have an evaluation of this webinar over there. One of the questions there is, what do you want us to talk about? And so talk to us, tell us what you need, and then we can provide it for you. If we don't have any more questions, I don't know if Prof. Genga, you have any final parting words as we bring this webinar to a close?
Maybe, and I hope over the next couple of months, our postgraduate class will really engage on this. Just to reiterate, the world has changed, meaning we are in a post-COVID era, and it's going to change how we do things. Things will not go back to what it was before, unless as engineers or people working in the built environment space, we have failed ourselves. Take the opportunity to recognize the opportunities that lie in a post-COVID environment. What does it mean to think about maybe the infrastructure, the business, the setup of how things worked before and how they've changed forever? This offers a new opportunity for you to see if it's possible, even if it doesn't directly align with your research. It's something that you can post your qualification, see how you can work in the new way and the new order of how things are functioning. Please look at the opportunities around interconnectivity, virtual working spaces, and how you can contribute to some of these ways of living. The industries that were heavily impacted because they depended on human interaction. How can you look at with whatever you're studying and where you find yourself? I'll give a classic example where people had to collectively work together. The mining sector is moving more into robotics now. And this may become a new theme that's moving in the space where you're not going to really put too many people who physically had to be involved in a space. And now they're thinking differently in terms of how do you make it possible so that if we ever find ourselves in another global pandemic, how do you survive that? So let us take this as an incredible learning opportunity. Take the time to apply the brilliant mind that you have around you, the mind that you have, and with the speakers that are coming, to start to see how do you position yourself critically to make a remarkable difference in the new world that's coming. It's already imagined, it was already birthed last year. How do you find yourself playing a critical role in that next step? With that, I close my bid, and I thank you so much, Dr. Clement, for the opportunity, and I'm excited for this class, and I really wish them all the best in their amazing journey as they proceed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Prof. Finally, I want to leave you with two African proverbs. The first one says that until the lion learns to ride, the tail of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. The second one says that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go further, go with people. We got here because we stood on the shoulders of giants that went ahead of us. Make sure that the postgraduate student community of practice that we are going to institute shortly, you join it and speak to somebody about your research, co-create, cross-pollinate ideas so that we can make Africa a beautiful one. On this note, I want to thank you for coming, and I want to thank all my colleagues and the people that I work with within the academic development unit. I know there is a lot of names to mention, but I just want to thank all of them for all the help, for setting this up, and for making this possible. I also want to thank the Dean of the faculty, Professor Ian Janrell, and Professor Rodney Genga for their time, and then for also sharing their wisdom nuggets with us. On this note, we declare this webinar adjourned and see you next week. Bye.
Thank you.